Hey, it's me.
It was just an ordinary afternoon, the kind where everything feels calm and predictable. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when my phone buzzed softly on the counter. It was my daughter's phone, left unattended after she'd rushed out earlier that morning. Normally, I wouldn't have even glanced at it, but something made me glance over, and that's when I heard it. A voice message notification popped up, and without thinking, I hit play. It was my daughter's voice, clear and urgent, speaking to her husband. At first, the words seemed innocent enough, but then the tone shifted. There was a tension in her voice I hadn't heard before. She was whispering, almost afraid someone might overhear. "I can't keep this from you anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "If Dad finds out, everything will fall apart. You have to promise me you won't tell him. Not yet." My heart stopped. What was she talking about? What secret could be so dangerous that it had to be hidden from me, from my husband? I felt a cold wave of suspicion wash over me, shattering the peaceful afternoon like a glass dropped on the floor. For years, I had believed our family was solid, unbreakable. We shared dinners, holidays, laughter, and even the occasional argument, but nothing that felt like a real threat. And yet, here was this voice message, a crack in the foundation I thought was so strong. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly as I replayed the message. The more I listened, the more questions flooded my mind. Why was my daughter so scared? What was she hiding from her own father? And why was her husband involved in this secret? I tried to push the fear aside, telling myself maybe it was something small, something that didn't really matter. But deep down, I knew better. There was a weight in her voice, a desperation that didn't lie. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a dark unknown. The house felt different suddenly, too quiet, too still. I glanced around, half expecting someone to walk in and shatter this moment of uneasy silence. But I was alone, left with the message and the growing knot of anxiety in my chest. I thought about my daughter, the little girl who used to run into my arms without a care in the world. How had things changed so much that she was now whispering secrets behind closed doors? And what about her husband? Was he protecting her, or was he part of whatever this secret was? I couldn't shake the feeling that my world was about to change forever. That one voice message had opened a door I never wanted to walk through. And yet, I knew I had no choice. I had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As I sat there, the message playing over and over in my mind, I realized something else. I wasn't the only one who needed answers. My whole family was on the brink of something none of us could have predicted. What could she be hiding? I had no idea my world was about to change, and I was terrified of what I might find on the other side. After hearing that voice message, I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was normal. But I also knew I had to be careful. If my daughter or her husband found out I was listening, or worse, snooping, it could shatter whatever fragile trust remained between us. So I started piecing things together quietly, like a detective in my own home, searching for clues I had somehow missed before. At first, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe the message was about something trivial, something I didn't need to worry about. But then little memories began to surface, moments I had brushed off as nothing, but now felt like warning signs. There was the time my daughter canceled dinner plans last minute, saying she wasn't feeling well, but I caught her texting furiously in the other room. Or the way her husband's smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes, like he was carrying a secret too heavy to share. Even my husband, who I thought I knew inside and out, had been acting strangely distant, distracted, almost like he was avoiding certain topics. I remembered a conversation from a few months ago when my daughter had seemed unusually nervous, her laughter forced and brittle. I had chalked it up to stress at work or just the usual ups and downs of marriage, but now, with the voice message echoing in my mind, those moments took on a new, darker meaning. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I had trusted blindly. I had believed in the perfect family image we all tried so hard to maintain. But trust, I learned, can be fragile, easily cracked by secrets and lies. Every day I found myself watching them more closely, searching for inconsistencies, for anything that might explain the fear in my daughter's voice. I noticed how she would sometimes glance nervously at her phone, or how her husband's tone would shift when certain topics came up. It was like they were living in a bubble of silence, hiding something from me, and maybe even from themselves. The anxiety gnawed at me. I wanted to confront them, to demand the truth, but I was terrified of what I might hear. What if the secret was worse than I imagined? What if it meant betrayal, not just of me, but of everything I had built my life around? I found myself lying awake at night, replaying conversations, analyzing every word and gesture. The calm I had once felt in my home was replaced by a restless tension, a constant undercurrent of doubt. I was caught between wanting to believe in my family and fearing the worst. And yet, despite the fear, I couldn't stop. Every detail I uncovered made me question everything I thought I knew. The more I learned, the more the picture shifted, like a puzzle with missing pieces that suddenly started to fit together in a way I never expected. I began to see patterns where before there had been only chaos. Small lies, half-truths, moments of avoidance, they all pointed to something bigger, something hidden just beneath the surface. But the hardest part was realizing that this secret wasn't just theirs to carry. It was mine now, too. It was a weight I had to bear, a truth I had to face, no matter how painful. I knew I was standing at a crossroads. I could keep pretending, keep living in denial, or I could confront the reality head on. But before I could make that choice, I needed to be sure. I needed to gather enough pieces to see the whole picture clearly. And so I kept watching, kept listening, kept searching, because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we have to uncover ourselves. What I didn't know then was that the deeper I dug, the more tangled the web would become, and the secret I was chasing was about to change everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. I couldn't keep the weight of the secret pressing down on me any longer. Every day, the silence between us grew heavier, and the distance in my daughter's eyes became impossible to ignore. I knew I had to confront her face to face, heart to heart, even if it meant risking everything. One evening, after dinner, when the house was quiet and the kids were asleep, I found her sitting alone in the living room, scrolling through her phone with a distracted look. My heart pounded as I took a deep breath and sat down beside her. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, startled, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place: fear, guilt, or maybe defiance. "I know there's something you're not telling me," I said gently but firmly. "That voice message I heard, it's been eating me up inside. I need to know what's going on." For a moment she was silent, her fingers tightening around the phone. Then, unexpectedly, she burst into tears. The walls she'd built around herself crumbled in an instant, and I saw the raw vulnerability beneath. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was trying to protect you, protect all of us." Her words shocked me. Protect me? What could be so dangerous that she felt the need to hide it, even from her own mother? "I'm scared," she admitted, wiping her tears. "Scared of what will happen if the truth comes out. Scared of losing everything. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. "You don't have to be scared anymore. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." But then, just as I thought we were breaking through, she pulled away, her expression hardening. "You don't understand," she said sharply. "There are things you don't know, things I can't explain right now." Her sudden shift left me reeling. The openness I had hoped for vanished, replaced by a wall of secrecy even thicker than before. "Why won't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of love and frustration. "I'm your mother. I deserve to know." She looked away, biting her lip. "Because some truths aren't just mine to share. They involve others, people who could get hurt." The complexity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized this wasn't just about her or me. It was about loyalty, protection, and the tangled web of family ties that bind us in ways we don't always understand. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," she said softly, her eyes meeting mine again. "But sometimes love means keeping secrets." Her confession left me torn. How could love and secrecy coexist? How could protecting someone mean shutting me out? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was sit there, feeling the raw pain of a mother's love clashing with the harsh reality of betrayal. As the night wore on, our conversation faded into silence, heavy with unspoken truths and unanswered questions. I realized then that this was only the beginning, that the secret my daughter was hiding was far more complicated than I had imagined. Her words shocked me, but the truth was still out of reach, and I knew I had to keep searching, no matter how deep the darkness went. Just when I thought I was beginning to understand the tangled web of secrets my daughter was hiding, everything changed. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where you expect nothing but routine, when a new piece of evidence surfaced, one that turned my entire world upside down and forced me to rethink everything I thought I knew. I had been going through some old family photos and messages on my daughter's phone, hoping to find a clue, anything that might explain the fear in her voice. I wasn't proud of snooping, but desperation had pushed me past the boundaries I once respected. That's when I stumbled upon a message thread between my daughter and someone I never expected, a name I hadn't heard in years, someone I thought was long gone from our lives. The messages were cryptic at first, filled with vague references and coded language. But as I read further, the truth began to emerge, and it was far more complicated and painful than I could have imagined. My daughter wasn't just hiding a secret from me. She was protecting a truth that threatened to unravel the very fabric of our family. The person she was messaging was her estranged uncle, a man who had disappeared from our lives after a bitter family feud years ago. I had always believed the feud was over money and pride, but these messages hinted at something darker, something that involved betrayal, lies, and a long, buried scandal that no one had dared to speak about. My heart pounded as I read a message where my daughter confessed her fear of the consequences if this secret ever came to light. She wrote about how her husband was caught in the middle, trying to shield her from the fallout, but also struggling with his own guilt. The weight of their silence suddenly made sense. Their fear wasn't just about personal shame. It was about protecting the entire family from a devastating truth. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe now, with this new information, I could finally piece together the puzzle and bring everything into the light. But that hope was quickly overshadowed by despair. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep the wounds ran and how much pain had been buried beneath years of silence. I thought about my daughter's earlier words, how love sometimes means keeping secrets. Now I understood why. The secret wasn't just hers to bear. It was a burden shared by many, tangled in loyalty and fear. The clarity I had hoped for was replaced by confusion and doubt. How could I protect my family when the truth was so dangerous? How could I confront a past that threatened to destroy us all? As I sat there, overwhelmed by the weight of what I had discovered, I knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about uncovering a secret. It was about facing a legacy of pain and betrayal that had shaped our family in ways I never imagined. Just when I thought I understood, everything changed, and there was no turning back. I thought I had prepared myself for every possible outcome, every painful truth that might come from uncovering my daughter's secret. But nothing could have readied me for the moment I realized her husband, the man I had welcomed into our family with open arms, was not just involved, but deeply entangled in the secret in a way that felt like a knife twisting in my heart. It started with a small detail I had overlooked before, a series of messages between him and the estranged uncle, the very person at the center of the family's darkest secret. At first, I told myself maybe it was innocent, just a few words exchanged, nothing more. But as I dug deeper, the truth became impossible to ignore. He had been hiding things from all of us, making decisions behind closed doors, and worse, keeping my daughter in the dark about his true role. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. How could someone I trusted so deeply hurt me like this? The man I had seen as a son, as a partner to my daughter, was now a stranger cloaked in lies. The betrayal wasn't just about secrecy. It was personal. It was about trust shattered, promises broken, and a family's foundation cracked in ways I never thought possible. I remember the moment I confronted him. My voice trembled, a mix of anger and disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep this from all of us?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. His silence spoke volumes, and in that silence, I felt the full weight of his betrayal. The pain was overwhelming. I felt humiliated, as if I had been blind to the truth for so long, fooled by the facade of a happy family. But beneath the hurt, something else began to stir, a quiet, fierce strength. I realized that while trust had been broken, I still had the power to reclaim my story. I could choose to be a victim, or I could rise above the betrayal and fight for the truth, for my daughter and for myself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more lies to uncover, more heartbreak to endure, but I was no longer willing to be silent or passive. This was my family, my life, and I was determined to protect it, no matter the cost. As I stood there facing the man who had betrayed us, I knew one thing for sure: this was far from over. The stakes had never been higher, and the battle for truth and justice was just beginning. For days after the confrontation, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of doubt and despair. The betrayal cut deep, and the silence that followed was suffocating. But as much as I wanted to retreat into myself to hide from the pain, I knew I couldn't face this alone. I needed strength, real strength, and that meant reaching out to the people I trusted most. I started with my closest friend, someone who had stood by me through every twist and turn of life. When I finally shared the truth, the secret, the betrayal, the heartbreak, she didn't flinch or judge. Instead, she listened with open arms and a fierce determination that gave me hope. "You're not alone," she said firmly. "We'll get through this together." Those words were like a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of light in the darkness. Encouraged, I reached out to a few family members I knew I could trust, people who had always been pillars of support, even when things got messy. Some were shocked, others saddened, but all were willing to stand by me. Together, we began to piece together a plan not just to uncover the full truth, but to protect my daughter and reclaim our family's dignity. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about standing up for what was right and refusing to be silenced. The shift was profound. Where I had once felt isolated and powerless, I now felt surrounded by a community of strength. Their support reminded me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the first step toward healing and empowerment. I started to see the cracks in the facade, not as the end of my family, but as the beginning of something new. A chance to rebuild on a foundation of honesty and courage. With every conversation, every shared tear, and every word of encouragement, my resolve grew stronger. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for my daughter, for the truth, and for every woman who has ever been betrayed, but refused to give up. I wasn't alone anymore, and together we could fight back. The day I decided to confront my daughter and her husband was the hardest day of my life. I had spent weeks gathering every piece of evidence I could find: messages, overheard conversations, and the painful memories I'd pieced together. I knew the truth was buried deep beneath layers of silence and fear, but I was determined to bring it into the light. When they both sat across from me in the living room, the air was thick with tension. I could see the flicker of guilt and apprehension in their eyes, but I refused to let that silence continue. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of all I'd discovered. "The messages, the secrets, the lies. It's time to stop hiding." My daughter's face paled, and her husband's jaw tightened. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was deafening, heavy with years of unspoken truths. Then, slowly, my daughter began to speak. Her voice was shaky but honest as she revealed the full story: the betrayal, the fear, the reasons behind the secrecy. She spoke of mistakes made, of love tangled with pain, and of the desperate attempts to protect those they cared about. Her husband followed, admitting his part in the deception, his regrets, and the burden he had carried alone for too long. The truth spilled out in a flood of emotion, raw, painful, but finally free. As they spoke, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. The darkness that had clouded our family for so long was finally lifting. The silence that had kept us apart was broken by truth. This was the moment everything changed for good. I realized then that justice wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about honesty, forgiveness, and the courage to face the past so we could build a better future. I looked at my daughter and her husband, not with anger, but with a fierce love and determination. "We will get through this," I said. Together, in that moment, I took control of my story. I refused to be a victim of betrayal. Instead, I chose to be a woman who stood strong, who demanded truth, and who believed in the power of family, even when it's broken. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Because sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest light. And this was our new beginning. Looking back on everything we've been through, I'm amazed at how far we've come. The pain was raw and overwhelming. There were moments when I thought the pieces of my family would never fit back together. But through the heartbreak and betrayal, I found something unexpected: strength. Healing didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, sometimes painful process of facing the truth, forgiving where I could, and setting boundaries where I had to. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting the past, it's about learning from it and choosing to move forward with courage. I found peace in knowing that I no longer had to carry the weight of secrets alone. Sharing my story, reaching out for support, and standing up for myself gave me a new sense of empowerment. It reminded me, and I hope it reminds you, that no matter how dark the road gets, there is always hope on the other side. If you're watching this and feeling lost or betrayed, know that you're not alone. We all face struggles that test us, but it's how we rise from those struggles that defines us. If my story helped you in any way, please share yours in the comments. Let's build a community where we can support each other, find strength in our shared experiences, and remind one another that we are stronger together. Because in the end, it's not just about surviving the storm. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And I believe we all have that power inside us.